All right, welcome back. So today I'm on my Outcast 8S. I'm gonna go ahead, change out some shock fluid. Problem with shock fluid, you see me a lot of the times running stock shock fluids, because on bashers, when you go up on weight on shock fluid, they tend to start bending shock shafts. And with the Outcast already having shock shaft issues, going up on weight too much can cause other issues. So at this point, shock fluid's been in there a little while. I have changed the shock fluid. It was changed about 2 years ago. When I bent some shock shafts, I went ahead and rebuilt all of them and went ahead and went back to stock, which was 40 weight. I'm going to go up to probably about 60 weight because I am running in 100-degree weather. So at those temperatures, what happens is the fluid starts to thin out a little bit. Colder weather, it'll thicken up a little bit. Hotter weather will thin out a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and take a look inside these shocks, see how the fluid looks, see if it's black. We're going to go ahead and service them. The springs, like I talked about in the front, were a little collapsed, but the nice thing is you can go ahead and turn up your preload and set your ride height again, which I did, and the ride height held, which means on impacts it's not collapsing the spring. The spring just over time basically collapsed a little bit. So I went ahead and made that adjustment, and my ride height is perfect. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to pop off these shocks. We're going to take a look inside. We're going to see how the fluid looks, and then we're probably going to go up to either 50 or 60 weight. I'm leaning towards 60 weight. It's not that big of a difference from the factory 40 weight, but we'll see. We'll see how the viscosity looks now. I have a feeling the viscosity is already down, and it has thinned out a little bit. But I'm going to pop the front two off first. So just going to pop them out of here. Now we're going to go ahead and take the preload back out of it so it's easier. And I do have some shock O-ring grease by TLR, the green slime. So we're going to go with 60 probably on this one. And we're going to use the 80 empty bottle to put the old fluid in. Servicing shocks is not that big of a deal. As long as you have fresh fluid, it's usually pretty good. And they are a little on the low side. Not much, but that'll cause aeration. And the fluid is a little on the black side. I'm going to let that drain out. I might have to go 50 in the back. All the weight seems to be up front because the Coke can motor is up front and the ESC is up front, so we can go thinner on the back fluid. And the back seems to be okay, it's just the front I'm having a little bit of issues with. But we're going to try to limit that by having really good fluid. See, this seems to be the same, and it could be just the bubble is pushing the fluid down that far. There we go. Let's see. That fluid is dirty, just not as dirty. It really is dirty. So I'm going to let that drain out a little bit. We'll be right back. All right. Try to clean out. So took almost a bottle. Right about half a bottle. So I think I'm gonna go up to just 50. Got just about a half a bottle left. So one bottle to do 2 shocks is what it's really going to end up to be, because these bottles aren't topped off that big or that much. So these, because they have the rubber diaphragms, you can't fill all the way to the top. So I'm leaving just enough space for the rubber diaphragm. You can see all the little bubbles coming to the top. So we're going to wait till that's clear, then we're going to go ahead and cap them. Alright, I'm going to cap this. It's funny how it seems like a train goes by every couple of seconds. Now, I still have to deadhead the shock, but I'm just putting the cap on for now, so I don't lose any fluid. And all this garbage in here. Clean up these shock shafts. That's what's happening. It's aerating. I am going to let this shock sit a little more. It's aerating. Still got air bubbles in it. You can see how white the bubbles are. That one's not so bad, but this one might have a bent shock shaft. I'm going to take a look at it, but I'm going to look to see if I have another shock. We'll be right back. All right. Well, a lot of bad things happened while I was trying to change shock fluid. Just a simple shock fluid change. Couple of things. One, shock shaft in this one is sticking. It has a slight bend to it. So then I grabbed my backup shocks that I have. Problem is, they're the smaller shock shafts. They're not the EXB version. So I was like, no big deal. I'm just going to, I'd have to switch both so that both sides are matching. So I was just going to rebuild these. Problem I had is one of my shock rod ends for this is no good. So then I was like, well, I'll just run down, pick up some shock shafts, because I don't have EXB shock shafts. I only have standard shock shafts. Well, it's going to take me a week to get them. Not going to see them till Thursday, Friday. So then I was like, well, no big deal. I have my Creighton. 2 of the shocks on the Creighton should match this. The 8S Creighton, I'll just steal those shocks so that I can get this up and running and then go rip it. Problem is when I looked at this, we have a broken control arm. So right here you will see that piece was laying in there, so I couldn't tell, but it is cracked. I went to move the control arm, noticed that it was pulling out. Two more jumps, this arm would have ripped off and had issues. And that's where we run into what I've always been talking about. At what point, because you guys know I'm $800 into refreshing this RC. Been out one time with the new chassis, and remember, when I changed this chassis, went over everything. Service diffs, went ahead and fixed the center gasket, the front diff gasket, ended up getting that on. Control arms were perfect. But on that light run I did with comparison with the X-Max, and guess where the X-Max is? Perfectly good working condition. And this one, I couldn't take it out, and my plans were to run this today. So I am now on the bench because there's just way too much work to do on the ground, just trying to change out some shock fluid and hit the track. My storage unit is literally around the corner from the track I run, so I was like, I'll just change the shock fluid over there real quick, make sure the shocks are in good working order, and we'll go out. So I don't know if the control arm or something happened and it bent that shock shaft. We did have one tumble at the BMX track, and to say that one little light crash caused this, it's just hard to believe. This is a heavy RC, anything's possible. You can't say the control arms on this thing are 4 years old, because like I've showed, the front of this RC gets new control arms all the time. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead. I have to change this control arm now, and then we're going to just do the temporary shock repair. I did order the shock shafts. I ordered 2 sets so that I have a backup, because I plan on doing the rear as well, and I don't want to get stuck with a bent shock shaft back here. The back seemed to be working perfect. Front seemed to be working perfect too, except it was having very hard landings. So we were just going to up the fluid a little bit, but already have a bent shock shaft. So I've got extra springs, extra shocks, all that stuff. So we're going to get the front of this thing fixed up. Instead of being some driving in this video, it's now all become a repair video again, which sucks. Oh, that's a 24. So I'm going to have to grab a 24 socket. I grabbed a 17 thinking it was an X-Max. Let me grab a 24 and we'll be right back. All right, 24 millimeters. Now before we take the wheel off, there's a center screw we're going to go ahead and take off. Actually, I don't even need to take the center screw off because I'm just changing the arm. So now I need the big size, I believe. Washers on the top. So I'm going to do these evenly. Back that one off. Don't need to take it all the way out. Get our red ring off of there. Brand new arm, because I have to stock them for my 8Ss. Go ahead, take out this screw, since I put the shock screw back. Hold this stuff out of my way. Let's see, what size is that back one? For the sway bar. And then I got to pull apart the whole bumper. And then the RC Guy Garage front bumper support. The only thing that doesn't break on this thing now is this RC Guy green support deal. Yep, the smaller size. So far, 1, 2, 3, this will be 4 different Allen sizes just to change a control arm. This goes along with those two. Go get you one. RC Guy Garage merch. Pin slides nice and easy out. There we go. Broken, cracked arm all the way over. The only thing that was holding it was this. It's literally cracked all the way across it. Look at that crack. All the way, it's just held on here. A little bit more running would have ruined a lot of stuff with this RC. Brand new axles I put in it, drive axles, would have got ruined, would have bent them. Go ahead and slide in this guy just to make it easier. I am going to have to take the steering off. A lot of work just to change an arm. Now, can we get it? Yes, we can. don't want to pull the caps off because I glued them in. That's just a safety nut. Making sure everything is tight. Should be able to get our bumper back on. One second, gotta take this call. What's going on, Dave? All right, so we got this front arm on. Now I'm gonna have to, I pulled one shock off. That one's, I pulled one shock off my Creighton 8S, the roller I just put together, because I'm going to need 2 good shocks to rebuild. This one I'm going to have to use the fluid out of, the one I already rebuilt for the EXB. So we're going to go ahead and get this spring off. Let me get this tension back down. So I'm going to use these temporarily until the shock shafts come in. So the front of the Creighton has the short shocks, just like the Outcast. Outcast has the short ones all the way around. So we're just going to borrow these for now. This one I got to do the same. So that shock shaft is good. And I haven't had the skinny shock shafts bend too often, even though I have bent them. But even the factory EXB shock shafts, like I said, I haven't been doing, you know, big air jumps with the 8S line on Arrma in years. So I was shocked to see that I bent one of the shock shafts on the EXB. And these are standard, these steering links are the standard steering links for the regular Outcast. These are actually off my 8S Creighton, and the thick steering shafts, they had a lot of play on the end, which made for very sloppy steering. That's on my Creighton, the M2C build. So thicker steering links are over there, and I've never had a problem bending these steering links, the stock skinny ones. But these ball ends have no play compared to the EXB bigger ones with the bigger shafts. They have a lot of slop in them. That's why I run the standard steering links on this. The rear didn't really matter, even though they're a little sloppy in and out. It didn't really matter, but for the steering, this made a huge difference, just putting the standard steering links on this to get rid of all the slop. So I did videos on that as well. So we're going to go ahead and crack these open. We're going to get rid of the fluid that's in here, because this fluid is old. This should be 40 weight. That fluid, as you see, is nice and clean. And then I'm going to take the fluid out of this and stick it into that, because this has the upgraded 50 weight fluid that I just put in these shocks because I was servicing them. So I'm going to just pour that into here. As you can see, the fluid's nice and clear. Because that fluid went all the way to the top on this. I'm actually going to take, and we're going to go ahead and, I can't believe I'm using all, yeah, see these cones. Look how clean that fluid is. Like I said, these shocks have like no runtime on them. I'm going to go 50 weight. And I'm probably going to do 60 weight on those. I might even stick these in the rear and put the thicker shock shafts up front. Okay, look at all the white bubbles in there. I'm going to have to wait until that clears out. This one's got no bubbles in it. So we're pretty good on that one. That one's got a ton of them in it. This is why you should have a shock holder. I was just checking something. Yeah, just making sure they're the same height. So this one. These things always have an issue with these original ones. Yeah, you see how that cup is disformed? It won't seal up properly. That was a problem with the original shocks. That's why I ended up on my original one. All of these cups were deformed and the shocks were leaking stock because of that issue. They were put together wrong and those cup things got deformed, so they didn't seal up properly. So I ended up replacing the shocks within the first month of owning it. I tried to fix them and I got some parts, but the cups themselves, you can tell how deformed that cup is. There's no way of straightening out that. I even tried, you know, some light heat, tried to get that to seal up properly, and it never did. So I ended up just replacing the shocks. So what you got to do, these cones have to be pushed down in there. Then you can thread these on. I'm going to deadhead the shock right to the threads. And it should push out. And then we can seal this up. Good, good. Bottom's out right at the threads. Then we're going to go ahead and stick shock rod end on this one while that one's still bleeding out. I think the original shocks, a lot of people had a problem with bending the shock shaft, so they went thicker, which is a good thing. The EXB shocks have always been good. I did go M2C on my original Outcast 8S, and the shock shafts literally, instead of bending, would snap because they're so hard. The hardened shaft, instead of bending like mine did, and I can still drive, it would, on the hardened ones from M2C, they would snap. Now I haven't tried the EXB thicker shafts from M2C, but I tried these original ones, and I still have the long ones for the rear of the Creighton because I used the short ones for the front of my Outcast and broke one. I just decided that I'd rather have them bend than shatter, because when they shatter like that, then it causes other damage, causes a lot of, you can't finish out your day of running, and on a bad crash, when it snaps, the arm ends up snapping and ends up bending your drive axle. It just has a lot of like bad things going on with it. So this thing, God, there is still a lot of milky air in this one, so I gotta let that one sit a while. I'm gonna kick the camera off until we get that air bubble out of there, or all the little air bubbles, then we can put that one back together. I mean, theoretically I can put the spring back on this one. See, and these don't have any guards protecting it. We're going to wait for that to bleed out, and then we're going to get that fixed. See, that feels so much better now. And the spring, look, no play in that spring now, and it's all the way up. Let me take a look at the springs and see which ones are the collapse springs. There we go. So as you see, the EXB ones are really short. I don't know if you noticed that, but these are all the other springs. Look how short that spring is. These all the way up. So that spring is 100% collapsed. Yes. So these three, this one is this spring, and then where's my other bent one? Oh, right here. Well, that's the same. Because it looks like the same. The short one looks like the same as the one I have on here, which should be the ones that came off the EXB. See, that's all the way up. See, this one is still a little taller than that one, and it's twisted over. I am gonna go with the longer spring. Because I don't think see that feels so much better. Yeah. The only two short ones are the ones that are on here. Yeah, these look like they lost their tension. Because I had to take up a bunch of slop. But I'm going to look into the spring rate. I just don't want to put too much spring rate on the thinner shafts. You know what I mean? And rip the bottom thing out. The springs bottom out. And I had to crank them way down to get the RC to the proper ride height. So I'll see how these sit with the taller spring. There we go. See, that feels better. Better, and it's all the way up. So now I should be able to put some preload on these and set my ride height. Yeah, see, that's already feeling way better. Can't wait to do the rear. Let's take a look at this thing. All the air bubbles are out. So what first thing I'm going to do is take the rubber diaphragm, and we're going to push it in here and push out the excess fluid. And we can put this into the cap so that it seats properly. We can screw it on. And before we bottom down, we'll go ahead and put the shock shaft down. See, these feel so much harder to put the springs on. Same gap, and the hole needs to face back. Now I need to just set up ride height. Look at that. So I'm going to raise it up some. Look at that. Look how sloppy that is. So much better in the front of this without EXB shocks. And the RC is sitting level now. These are cranked all the way up, and these aren't cranked up nearly enough. So I'm going to go ahead and pop the rear shocks off, and I'll kick the camera on as soon as I see something funny. We'll be right back. Alright, so I went ahead and finished up the rear shocks. As you see, rebound is a lot better. Went 60 weight in the back because of the valving. The valving is different on the EXB shocks than they are on these. And it still moves up faster because the valving is a little different, but at least it's full now and it dampens now. Where you can see the front is a lot slower because of the valving in the standard shocks. So I might go ahead and just change the valving on the EXB shocks to slow it down, but I'm going to run it this way and see how it does. I think this is why. I think they changed it because they were bending shock shafts on the standard one a lot easier than the EXB. So to solve that, they went thicker on the shafts and opened up the holes on the valving so that it would bottom out. But I think the standard shock valving works better, and I think with the bigger shafts it's going to do pretty good. And I already showed that the springs on the front were collapsed, so now all the springs are the same height. 60 in the rear, 50 up front, but I believe we do have different valving just by this. And the reason I think this valving is better is the motor ESC all the weights towards the front, and I think that works better than that. But I think for landing, I think the way that this thing, as you see, collapsed and coming up, comes up pretty even. Back comes up faster, front comes up slower. And that's going to help with wheelies and that kind of stuff. In front end landings, it's really going to stop and then bring up the RC slowly on wheel stands. But we'll see how it performs, especially hitting ramps. It's going to really, the front takes a beating on hitting any kind of jump and then up in the air. But we'll see. Remember, batteries still have to go in here as well. That's more weight once the batteries are installed. I'm probably going to have to change the spring rate, but other than that, it seems to be okay. Definitely 100 times better. Rear shock fluid was black and low, just like the front was. So all the fluids seem to be low. The last two bolts, and this RC is ready to rip. Now I do have the EXB shock shafts coming, so I will put the EXB shocks back on the front, but I might just change out the valving. And then here's our broken control arm that's no good, the reason that stopped me from running today. So we're going to get this thing out, but there we go. Hopefully this helps you on setting up yours, and hopefully by the shocks working properly now, this thing will land a lot better. So we're going to get it back to the track with the X-Max and this one again, with this one fully repaired. So far, this thing has been costing me a fortune every time I run it, at least $100 in damage and repairs. Between chassis, everything that I had to redo on this RC. So we'll see where it stands now. Remember, new tires, new body, a new rear control arm, one new front control arm, so I only have 2 used control arms on this thing. Both front uppers are brand new, and brand new chassis, and just maintenance and service on everything. Wheelie bar, we had to replace that as well. This one was broken. So far, you know, this thing's almost brand new. But we'll see. We're going to get it out. We're going to run it, and we'll see how it continues to do. So far, the standard X-Max, or the standard Outcast, always has performed well for me, and that's why I ended up selling the standard one. And the EXB one has always done well in the past. So we'll see. Gets a little frustrating trying to go out and rip and finding a problem right off the bat from the last time you ran it. But it seems to be the norm with this. I didn't feel in the last video that I did anything unjust or to, you know, to cause any kind of control arm or anything to break. Maybe, you know, the springs and the shock fluid caused the incident. I don't know. I don't know if that arm, I never saw it crack, never saw an issue. It had to break on the last run because, like I said, I changed the chassis. We inspected everything, checked every nut and bolt, cleaned out every hinge pin, everything on this thing. But we'll see. We'll get it out and rip it again, and hopefully it's at the state to where I'm just going to enjoy it and don't have to keep wrenching and put money into this RC. But we'll see. All I can do is show you what's going on. And remember, these control arms aren't 4 years old. I constantly break control arms on the Creighton and the Outcast. The Creighton with the M2C chassis, I broke every time I was out. This one, unless I had usually a bad crash on a big air jump, was the only time I was breaking control arms. And you know, maybe it was a fluke. Maybe the plastic was just old enough to where it was dried out. I don't know. But we'll go rip it again and cross our fingers that this thing is mint. We'll catch you on the next video. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this helps on how to service your shocks and check your springs. Definitely keep the RC off the ground when you store it so that the springs don't have weight on them. I don't know why these are collapsed. The ones that have been sitting in the box for 5 years, because remember, my original Outcast 8S I bought before this was even released, and those 2 shocks have been sitting for 5 years and the springs are perfect on it. This one collapsed. But let's see. Like, comment, subscribe. We'll catch you on the next video. Thanks for watching.